Thank you. Well, I'm John Lee. I'm the chairman and CEO and founder of Silver Elephant. We're a company listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange, and with a flagship asset, which is the Pulacayo silver-lead-zinc project, the company he's been operating on in the last 6 years. I myself have over 20 years of experience in the mining industry. First 10 years as an investor, and the latter 10 years of running Silver Elephant.
John, thank you very much for the introduction. You're here really because you put out some interesting news on Pulacayo. You've done a deal on some offtake. Perhaps you could outline the kind of the broad terms of that deal.
Yeah, Merlin, as you know, the capital markets, especially in the junior mining industry, have been struggling. So the company's been given a mandate in the last 12 months to find different ways of generating cash flow that's not diluted for the interest of the shareholders. So the deal has been in discussion for a number of months with a company called NDM Mining. And what NDM has is they have a oxide processing facility about 180 kilometers away from Silver Elephant's flagship project, Pulacayo, in Bolivia, by paved road. And Merlin, I had talked to Matt about 4 months ago. I mean, Pulacayo is a big project, over 100 million ounces of silver in the ground. It has that oxide layer that's fairly high grade. And so we were able to manage to transact with Andean Mining, and literally looking at a truck and shovel operation of getting that top layer oxide from the deposit and have it trucked to Andean. And in the process, Andean is going to reimburse Silver Elephant for certain operating expenses. In addition to that, it's going to provide over $5 million US, about 6.5 Canadian dollars in cash flow into the parent company for just providing that technical expertise, the data room access, and just overall facilitating to making sure a smooth operation of that shoveling and trucking operation. Marlon.
And from that phase one oxide plan, in that conceptual pit, you've got about 800,000 tons in the indicated category and about 235,000 tons in the inferred category.
Yes.
And the grades are that the 800,000 tons is coming at around 239 grams per ton silver. They pay you for your costs, so you get paid for a cost, and you get this $5 million payment. But there's a kind of a kicker if the silver price rises. But there's no it's not on the amount of silver that comes out that you're getting paid. Is that right?
That is correct. I mean, one of the things it's a bit of give and take, Merlin. So in foregoing the upside for silver, so the payment $5 million is now linked to the silver price, but it's more linked with the time frame. So think of it more like you going into a for lack of a better example, a Chinese buffet, and all you can eat, but you would give it a certain amount of time.
A certain amount of time.
It'll be 5 years and a cap of 800,000 tons. And if you buy more than 800,000 tons, which means that there's probably additional discoveries being made, or they're going after lower cutoff oxide materials, maybe because of rising silver prices, then a separate deal will have to be made. However, we didn't give the farm away, meaning that I think, first of all, the silver oxide is around 6 million ounces, about 5% of the overall resource of the Pulacayo project. And secondly, we're going to get additional $1 million payment if silver goes over $28, and another $1 million payment when silver is over $32. And one thing more that I just want to preface that I've known this project for almost 15 years when I first started in the silver mining investment business, and we're very fortunate to get this project 7 years ago in 2016, so it was 7-8 years ago. The days of 200 grams of oxide on surface is long gone. And so I think just because there's been a few transition of the project's ownership, and also that the company was really focusing on expanding, chasing the elephant, growing that resource. So hasn't been a lot of attention on this 800,000 tons of oxide materials on surface, even though it doesn't seem a lot, 800,000 tons, but you're looking at 5 to 7 million ounces of silver. And that's what I said, because of this downdraft in the junior mining market, sort of given us a stepping back a bit and giving us sort of an overall look on how can we extract value. And in hindsight, I was like, 10 years ago, silver is $15, 15 years ago, and now silver is $25, and this 800,000 tons actually spell out to over 100 million ounces of silver in the ground, of which I think we're very pleased to have struck a deal where where Andean is getting replenishing their plant utilities utilization, and we're getting a good upfront payments of which minimizes dilution for our shareholders, Merlin.
Okay, but you say that the days of 200 grams silver and oxides are long gone, but there's a little bit left, which is what they're going after, isn't that right?
Well, meaning that greenfield exploration project, if you have had 200 grams of silver oxide on surface with good tonnages, they're most likely have been already being shoveled and bought out by the likes of Pan American and Silver Standards and all these other majors. So my point is there's not a whole lot of oxide projects out there on the Earth's surface at this kind of grades that are still yet to be controlled by a junior, Merlin.
Okay, and so they're going to truck it 180 kilometers. And so they've done the calculations. They think that they can pay you for the kind of the expertise that you're providing, your cost tranche, the trucking, the mining operation, the trucking and the processing, and they can still make some money on it. And you'll be making about $1 million a year, up to potentially 1.25 if the extra kickers come in. What does that money do for you in terms of survival and then thriving? You've got to survive and then to thrive.
Right. Well, Merlin, you brought up 2 points. I think first of all, if you look at Andean, let me just say they're a terrific company to deal with, and really a first class, very professional, and there's a lot of synergy and forming a formidable force because they also had a good track record in operating in Bolivia, just like Silver Elephant in the last 10 years. They're currently producing about 4 to 6 million ounces per year. And, at a very modest rate of something like around 500 tons per day, the Paca oxide operation could add, fairly significant, maybe 10 to 30% of their overall production and head grades improvement. Right now, they're mining head grades about 100 grams to 120 grams per ton. So this is going to be a welcome sort of a blending into their existing operations. And I think they've done their maths very well. They're a very good operator and have very good financing. So I think they probably, and their stock went up, last couple of days with good volume. So I think that it is a synergistic operation for them. So having said that, in terms of a Silver Elephant, even though the contract is over a 5-year period, but Elephant has received $1.2 million on signing, and another $1.8 million in about 5 months after they have become familiar with the project, and another $1 million in January 2025. So the majority of that $5 million will be received within the first 16 months from signing. And $5 million US to $6.5 million Canadian is more than covers the company's G&A. So the company is now looking to raise additional capital at this point. And I think the market right now, Merlin, the market's now rewarding for even sort of above average drill results. And given the advance of the project, over 100,000 meters already drilled, rather we're going to be deploy that capital in more towards helping Andean and community relations and also getting the project fully permitted, which we expect to be sometime next year. Just over de-risking the project, minimize capital expenses, and wait for a better day, a turnaround in the junior market, and hopefully a bit of a higher prices in the silver market as well.
So you might use some of that money on community relations, which will and also to help Andean. Isn't that kind of a slightly circular flow of funds? Yes.
Let me be clear. Any parts related to moving oxide would be reimbursed, and it would be by NDM Mining. However, keep in mind that, as I said, right, this is only the top layer of what the company and what Pulacayo is all about. And we still have over 95 million ounces of silver in the ground. So I think some of the money will be earmarked up to $5 million, probably between $1 and $1.5 million towards sulfide permitting, which is different from the oxide permitting, and also some of the engineering, it's not a feasibility level 43-101 compliant. However, we have a good operational team, and I think we'll be able to source some of the just legwork and getting basic ideas as to what it'll take to get a sulfide plant and operation started. I'm not talking 3,000 tons per day, but more modest, between 300 tons per day and 600 tons per day. And given Merlin that Bolivia is the sixth largest silver producer in the world, a lot of their operations are very small scale, like we're contemplating for a sulfide starter. That I think internally we can do actually quite a bit of work to assess to the viability and economics of a potential sulfide mining and milling operation at Pulacayo at the current silver prices.
And would you wrap that up into a kind of a formal NI 43-101 compliant study? Would it be a PEA? Would it be a PFS? Would you try to aim to kind of pull it? How would you communicate that to the market?
Well, I think that's the end goal. Right now, Merlin, we're a $10 million market cap, which is unfathomable only 2 years ago when we were near the century mark. So I don't think the market is looking for a whole lot from us right now. So we try to be as entrepreneurial as we can. Let's do a bit of internal studies, getting some collection of data. And if we do feel that the project is feasible or at least has some bite to it, that it could generate cash flow with a good return of capital within a good period of time, is Merlin also that the interest rate right now is very volatile. And I think that if we have some good early indicators as to the project could generate good cash flow at the current silver prices, and we definitely would then hand over the data and make that official study. But regardless, I think some of the legwork we can do is going to save the company money instead of hiring high price consultants to come in and do these 43-101 from the get go. So the plan is definitely to get this the study formalized if the management does see some light in the end of the tunnel or some good economic indicators of returns on the project.
When you talk about Bolivian operations being quite small, kind of 300, 400, 500 tons per day, isn't that typically on kind of narrow vein, high grade structures? But isn't the nature of Pulacayo to be a kind of a bigger tonnage, lower grade target? I just wondered how that works. Yeah.
Merlin, you're absolutely right. Pulacayo, for your information, it's actually the second largest silver mine in the world based on historical production. The deposit is a bit like San Cristobal. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that project. It had churned out over 20 million ounces per year for Sumitomo. It's one of the largest silver open pit operations in the world. I think maybe the sixth was eighth largest. And it's doing around 50,000 tons per day. Pulacayo is kind of similar to San Cristobal in that Pulacayo was over 600 million ounces being dug out of the ground at Pulacayo. And, it went to the deposit. It's very, very high grade. They're not after anything less than 500 grams per ton, under 6% net in zinc. So, and the 100 million ounces is configured on a fairly low grade sulfide, like you mentioned, but it's really configured as a giant 50,000 ton per day open pit operation at around 100 grams silver equivalent.
Yeah,
you could make a go at it because that's the equivalent to San Cristobal is today. However, maybe not profitable at today's metal prices and inflationary environment. However, the point I'm driving at is there is a detailed sensitivity studies posted on our website in the technical study that there's about 40 million ounces of very high grade silver, about 4 to 5 million tons out of this 50 million ton resource. That's grading at over 400 grams per ton and over 5% net in zinc. And that's also fairly shallow from the attic, around 100 to 200 meters from the attic level, which means that the Pulacayo is one of the very few projects in our view that have the flexibility or the optionality of, putting $1 billion in the ground of which, before COVID is a possibility of doing big shovels of 40,000 tons per day. But given the current circumstances, it's just not practical and feasible. So that's why we're talking about 300, 600 tons, of which then the configuration will be very, very different. This will be an underground operation, of which there's still some artisanal mining happening, and they're digging, very, very high-grade things out of the ground. And every week or every month, Glencore and Trafigura would dispatch a truck or two, getting this very high-grade ore into their plants. And there's, you're talking about over 40 million ounces out of the ground today in Potosi region. So it's one of the largest silver district in the world. And Pulacayo, I think if the company were to commission a sulfide operation or making a production decision in 2024, it will likely be a very high grade, structurally controlled, very narrow sulfide veins out of Pulacayo. And we're not talking narrow. It's actually 3 to 5 meter width. This is not so much like some of the other Mexican operation in the public traded junior companies. These are actually very nicely mineable width of 3 to 5 meters. And we do have some good intercepts over 20 meters, actually over 1,000 grams per ton. So, I mean, this is not like every single vein and they pinch and swell, but we do believe that there is a good possibility potential as a follow-up to the oxide operation to get the sulfide operation moving.
Okay, thank you. I understand that much more clearly now. So you're effectively going to be doing internal re-engineering studies on a potential high-grade, smaller tonnage reconfiguration from within your wider resource.
That's right. And I think, again, it's been 10 years in the making. Merle, we welcome your audience to visit silver-lead-zinc.com, of which there's a technical study. What's important is when we talked about the historical 600 million ounces coming out of the Pulacayo Tahoe vein. So that's where the majority of the capital is being spent on it. It also has a shallow oxide layer of a lower grade, but it's the prized possession of the high grade sulfide materials that the company's after. But the project, the transaction that we announced with NDM Mining is actually a satellite deposit called Paca, and that's 7 kilometers away from Tahoe vein, which means that if the company were to build a small sulfide operation and getting some of the high grade sulfide materials from Pulacayo, and once the oxide gets removed from Paca, potentially we can extract the sulfide from Paca as well as a complementary feed into the Pulacayo mill. So there's a lot of different possibilities, and maybe a little confusing, but I think suffice to say that we're one of the very few companies that we're very confident that we'll not be seeking additional capital infusions. I think we're going to be getting out of this, downward spiraling private placements with warrants attached to them. And at the current market cap of $10 million Canadian with over $40 million US sunk into the project, over 100,000 meters drilling, I think that, these are a couple of differentiators that really felt setting Silver Elephant apart from a few other of our peers that are struggling right now. And that's what Valen is compelled to get on your program and share this really very exciting development for Silver Elephant at this stage.
So sorry, in that you said you don't see the need for external financing, but you'd be willing to kind of go to the existing shareholder base to kind of do kind of incentivized capital raise. Did I understand that right?
No, that's not in the cards. Like I said, if we execute the business plan well, we anticipate we expect $3 million US coming in before end of January, 4 months from now. So that's $3 million would be close to $5 million Canadian. That's more than of our capital G&A for till the end of 2024. So I think the possibility it exists. I think if the silver price has looking up and made a turnaround, and if the audience and investment community continue to sort of return back to rewarding junior company for good drill results or whatever else, then the landscape, the picture would turn. However, we don't have that necessity to tap into our shareholders and for additional funding requirement. And when you would say the words G&A, you include the team that you've got on board, which has got the engineering capability to do the internal study Everything.
Next year.
Everything.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Good.
You know what? 100 million ounces in the ground, 96,000 meters drilling. NDM clearly has done their homework. We're selling at 10 cents an ounce in the ground of silver, and we're almost $100 million market cap only a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, just this drip of the declining silver prices created a vacuum for us. We had a lot of enthusiasm and excitement for this project going forward. And, I think now is a good opportunity for investors looking to rebalance their portfolios or looking for projects that doesn't have this dilution concerns on the horizon. it's an interesting project to look at, Merlin.
You said that your shareholders earlier in the interview. You said that your shareholders are not expecting too much from Silver Elephant. What would you like to be able to? What do you think they should be looking for? What do you think they are looking for that might help the company kind of get more traction in terms of its valuation?
Well, Merlin, the story is well told. 2 years ago, Silver Elephant was trading 100% of its float on a quarterly basis, and we're one of the highest. We're the top OTCQX top 50, so we're in the highest volume trading in all of pink sheets in the United States. So I think the story is well told. I think the key here, Merlin, is having the management set objectives and goals of which we can achieve. And we're not looking something like a pie in the sky, right? But right now, that's just stick to the basics. Make sure that we don't overstretch ourselves in our expenses. We control our expenses well. Cut off all discretionary spending, and then bring the story back within the investment community, which is working closely with the NDM Mining, make sure that they're a happy customer, deliver the oxide layer materials, continue to strengthen our local communities and with our government relationship, and then advance almost on a stealthy mode on our potential sulfide operation and make a construction decision after we understand, have a very clear understanding. It has a very conservative approach and has a very tight hands-on with the cost of the sulfide operation. And at that time, let's look at the capital market at the time to see if there's additional partner, maybe NDN or maybe some other companies that we have talked to that were interested in our operation. And there are a number of them, in fact, are in our data room. And then towards the end of next year, 2024, and then maybe potentially make a construction decision on a sulfide operation, and with some innovative, creative alternative financing to minimize that dilution, to put that mine into production for the sulfide operation.
2024, sorry, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what are you trying to get done in 2024? Kind of advance the sulfide on a stealth basis and potentially reach a construction decision?
Yes.
Okay, well, there we go. That would certainly be something for shareholders to look forward to.
Well, as a next step plan, right? From India, because $5 million is good for probably early 2020, end of 2024, 2025. So then the company, the shareholders, will be staring at a sulfide potential, a sulfide deposit. It has high grade, it has open pit potential, but what is the next step towards that? And so, that's something that the company is going to be focusing on, in addition to working closely with the NDN to make sure that they're a happy customer. We strengthen our community relationship with the government relationship, and then looking into how we can, what we can do with this sulfide deposit from a high grade, small operation, from all of which we can have some certainty of generating cash flow, and from there we can expand. Right now, at a 10-year at 5%, it's extremely prohibitive, costly to raise capital from the market, and we just want to assure our shareholders that we understood that, and that any additional expansion plan or production plan would be looking at funding from identified potential joint venture partner, and with a very clear plan of generating cash flow to return our shareholders.
Thank you. And you mentioned the high turnover you had on the OTCQX. What does your shareholder register look like? What do you know about your shareholder register that you can tell me?
Well, Merlin, it's hard to say because, as I said, in 2021, we were turned over our entire shareholder base on a quarterly basis. So at this point, unless the shareholder is over 10%, it's not really a disclosable event. However, I can share that Elephant has raised over $50 million since the turnaround of the silver market in 2017, and of which we raised of the $50 million, $30 million was raised since late 2020. So, the likes of Eric brought a number of very big funds out of Toronto, and a couple of US and European institutions had also participated. We had also very strong support from BMO, Canaccord, Research Capital, Red Cloud. So, it's a well-told story, Merlin, in the community. Unfortunately, we had a few letdowns. Some of that is company-driven. We were going after the big operational, the pie in the sky. But some of I think majority is market-driven. We're no different from a number of our peers are they're all sort of, in the mode of sort of trying to reinvent their way, themselves, or finding a way just to ride out that storm and to come to the other side of the to the other side of the tunnel or the rainbow.
And the company kind of had a coal heritage right at the beginning, and you made some money off coal last year. I see that Dalian coal prices are way back at the kind of record levels again. Have you got any little bits of coal left in the cupboard that you can sell on?
Well, we got more than a little bit coal in the cupboard. We got over 200 million tons of coal that's open pit, fully permitted. And it's 5,000 GCB coal, so it doesn't need any washing or sorting. Very low sulfur, so it's environmentally compliant. Merlin, last year, thermal coal went up to over $400 a ton, which is unprecedented record. Part of that is geopolitics with Australia and China sanctions and Russian sanctions and whatnot. But right now, thermal coal still stayed at pretty buoyant levels of over $100 a ton. Elephant generated over $500,000 in net cash flow. And some of that's repatriated back to the parent in Vancouver from Mongolia. But thermal coal prices has been very volatile, and the way we operate in Mongolia is very cost conscious. So we are lending equipment, we're borrowing equipment, and our team is very lean and mean. So right now the operation is curtailed because there's been a correction in the thermal coal market. However, just in the last, really the magnitudes of the thermal coal market is no worse than silver. They're going up and down 20-30% on a monthly basis. So it's a little difficult so we're just being nimble right now. The operation is curtailed right now. I think if coal prices were to go up another 20% from where we are, which is entirely possible, then we'll be looking to resume coal sales and operation on a small scale basis. And what I mean by that is, Merlin, we're looking at probably our goal based on just experience from early operations in 2023 would be somewhere around $100,000 to $200,000 US per month on a monthly basis. But it's not a big operation, but the beauty of that is, we can stop and we can start whenever we want. So you're looking at, so that is the sort of the goal we have, but that will be highly dependent on where thermal coal prices going from there. So I would not factor into, that part of the cash flow into our operation, nor are we promoting that. However, it'd just be a nice surprise if we were to make it, resume production. However, I just want to ensure that the company is looking after our purse, so that I think the last thing we want is to divert our attention and focus away from the silver into coal and lose money from that, right? So that's the last thing we want. So I think if we were to do anything on the coal front, I think first of all making sure that we're not losing money, and then secondly is trying to make sure we are nimble and flexible to operate depending on the thermal coal price. And third, if we can extract reasonable $100,000 per month from Mongolian operation, we'll be very happy to take that.
So in essence, you have to not move on anything until you're sure that the margins are going to give you that profit.
Or if we can get one of these partners, kind of like Andean, that would be willing to forefront the capital, provide the mining expertise, provide the equipment, cover all the basic expenses, then we're definitely are willing to do that. And we actually, some of the customers that we sold to in January 2023, which we disclosed, they're a very, very big shop in China. They import 20 million tons of coal from Mongolia. So they certainly have the capability in technical and financial and in relationship to move this project that we have in Mongolia called Ulanovu to the next level. But I think parties just all are looking for a bit of stabilization in thermal coal prices before we advance our discussion toward the next step.
Yeah, and you're not going to change the name to Coal Elephant.
Well, you know what? We had, the company had a bit of a history you can look into. We spun out the nickel asset. We spun out the vanadium asset. We spun out the royalty company. So it's one for four, which has never been tried out and precedented on the TSX. And that's why we got a little bit of backlash because the shareholders, looking at four companies and obviously silver elephant prices were adjusted accordingly, having some of the assets been carved out, and that precipitated or exacerbated the downward spiral that we experienced. It's not so much there's something wrong with our assets, silver asset per se, but we actually had planned a company called Thermal Coal, Mega Thermal Coal, and that is wholly owned by Silver Elephant. So from an arrangement, from sort of the corporate arrangement perspective, the company is ready to spin out the coal asset at the right timing.
Good. Well, you had the heady heights of share price of $5 per share in 2020. So,
yes, we did.
It's a long way back. John, thank you very much for taking the time to explain what your plans are. In terms of the news flow for the next few months to the end of the year and perhaps into the first quarter of next year, can you kind of give me some indications of what you're hoping to put out?
Certainly. Well, I think, Merlin, given, as I said, our market cap of $10 million Canadian with over 100 million ounces in the ground and no bank debts, very little debts to speak of, maybe it's a choice to our shareholder that there are not going to be negative surprises coming on the horizon. Is what they want to hear, that there's not another shoe that's going to drop. And I think that's first of all. And secondly, we're working we want to make sure that we want to support and making sure NDM is successful in their operations and get their trucking and shovel operations started before end of the year. Have a ribbon cutting event inviting communities and government, and then so that we can in order to receive the second payment, which would be $1.8 million US in January 2024. That's only 4 months from now. So then the company will be well financed for our entire G&A and objectives for 2024. And then hopefully at the end of 2024, scheduled to make a news on our sulfide operation, right? And I think that'll be very welcoming news. And in addition, there's another $2 million from NDM payments in January 2025. That's $1.5 million. And then another half a million in 2026. We want to make sure that we continue to support their endeavor, making sure that they're successful. While in the meantime, restart our conversation with a number of majors that we are having right now regarding our sulfide operation. So there's plenty to do. And then if we get a surprising news release from our coal fronts, and that's all for the better. Right now, we just want to make sure we want to plug all of our holes, making sure that we preserve our share count. It's only 30 million shares. We do have a number of shareholders that are more retail, private, accredited individuals that are well supportive of our endeavor. Everybody is underwater. A majority, 90% of our private placements were done over $3. We did a small run of less than $1 million at 45 cents. And right now the stock is trading at 25 cents. So we just want to make sure we clean up those loose shares below 45 cents and start to create and build shareholder value, rather than having to, dilute ourselves to oblivion, Merlin.
Sounds like a good plan. John, thank you very much for explaining it to me, and good luck in the months ahead.
And thank you for your time. Terrific questions.